Hello, I'm ShieldWar100 and welcome back to my games room for another Chain of Command battle report. It's been a little while since we've had one of those, and yeah, it's back to Chain of Command. We're moving on in the timeline from my previous games to, well, February, early March 1945 in the Ruhr region of Germany, where the British will be attacking this town, as you can tell, and trying to push their way forwards through Germany towards ultimate victory. But yeah, it's my back's been killing me recently, so I haven't really had time to do any proper research for a game. Let's just pan the camera across to show you the battlefield. Yeah, no real research for a game, so I just wanted to play a nice, standard, straightforward scenario. British regulars versus German regulars, and some fun things. So we're going to go to the end of the timeline to play with them, okay? Yeah, that's where we are. So we've got the town area itself. As you can see, it's looking quite worse for wear. This represents a giant bombed out crater, so to speak, which is filled with water, bomb crater should I say, and you know, so yeah, no cover in that really, bit of a quagmire. And then we've got a little sort of industrially sort of area here with two, well, with a big area of bombed out factory and some crates and whatnot for something different to fight over, is what I thought. And yeah, it should be an interesting little place, lots of roads to use for vehicles and things, so and mixture of hard cover and big open spaces, and should be good for some maneuver and fire. Okay, well, on that note, let's see which models and units are in which force. And let's start with the Germans. I've created a little bit of a scratch force for them. I like little ad hoc formations, but there's a core of a platoon in there, so it's not too difficult for, or too disjointed for the rules. Right, so we've got a little 4-man reconnaissance team. I keep seeing it in my box. I really want to use it, and then I never actually do. So here it's coming out today. Little 4-man team with their tiny little half-track, I think is very cute. Pretty cool. Packs a punch too, because it's got a light machine gun as well. 2 full squads of German grenadiers, including their obvious light machine gun teams, their junior leaders and their riflemen. 2 units of them, as you can tell. The senior leader, the Panzerschreck team, of course, like them. And for funsies, we're going with a late war Mark IV, which got from Rubicon models, and I really like it because of that Scherzen on it. You know, this it's wire, well, I think it's brass etch actually, yeah. To put that on, and it looks the part, and I do like it. Don't get a very often chance to use it either, because it's a very late war Mark IV, this one, so there you go. Still a force in its own right though, but eminently killable. Oh yes, and as you can see, I've got some tank traps and a couple of pieces of barbed wire that the Germans can set out to taste where they want before the game begins. So there we are, and that's where we'll see where they are in a bit. Okay, let's move on to see what the British have. And here are the British attackers. We have a full platoon of Tommies, no swapsies out this time. The Germans, if you noticed, were down a squad in exchange for their reconnaissance and some you know, some barbed wire emplacements, etc. But yes, a full platoon of 1, 2, 3 squads, but with its 2 senior leaders, its 2-inch mortar team, the obligatory Piat team, which I really like because it goes boing. We've also, for support though, we've got a Wasp flamethrower universal carrier. Looking forward to seeing what it can do. I've used one of these to great effect in the slightly upscaled version of this, I Ain't Been Shot Numb, which is another largest set of rules with set on bigger engagements, but the Wasp did horrible things to defenders in that one. And notably for this period, an A34 Comet joining the field for the Allies. Very cool tank, this one. I do like it a lot. It's basically a kind of a Cromwell on steroids, so yeah, very late war for the British, but top-notch stuff really, and certainly capable of tangling with the late war German tanks. So in this particular scenario, the Allies actually get to push the Germans around in terms of the quality of their equipment. So, but nonetheless, the Germans being on the defensive will give them plenty to fire back at this British tank here and all the things it's trying to support. So there you go. In terms of quality for both sides, they're both counting as regular. I'm not giving anyone elite status or green, to be perfectly honest. It's I don't think it would be very relevant at this point of the war, and you know, neither side was going to be, well, both, sorry, the British, sorry, The Allies, I'm sure, would be aware that the war's winding down, so I'm not going to be giving them Superman status or anything like that, so because no one wants to be the last person killed before victory anyway. But yeah, there you go. We're going to move on now. Going to start setting up. I'm going to do the recon phase. I'll relate to you where the jump off points are, and yeah, everything we need to get going, really. Right, I have done the patrol phase and all the jump off points are now placed. I've worked out the force morals for the two sides. The British only rolled a 1, so they merely have a paltry 8 force morale today, so they're going to be very careful about how they orchestrate this attack. Germans not much better, only a 9 for them, so both sides pretty brittle in terms of damage that they can take, but it doesn't mean it can't still be a bit of a bloodbath in the end. We'll see, won't we? As for where the jump-off points were, the Germans, don't forget, in attack and defence scenarios, managed to put their recon markers up a little bit further ahead. Patrol markers up a bit further ahead, and the Allies come on from the baseline. So Germans had a bit of a advantage, but nonetheless they were still pegged back quite a lot by the British, who managed to roll a massive 6 moves for theirs. But so the Germans are over here. We got one in this bombed out building here. One had to go pretty far towards the back inside this ruin, and the other one was way over here in the factory sort of area. Okay, so yes, they're kind of spread a bit, but they can still lay down the fire, and there's good empty space between the two, so they can hopefully mutually support each other with their quite prodigious amount of firepower. Moving back over here to show you where the British ended up. They ended up with one right quite far up the board in this corner, ready to make use of this handy looking building over here. We got one right in the middle of the board, just about over here, and one had to go quite far back, unfortunately for them. You can just see it poking out of the forest just there, but yeah, so both sides got pretty good coverage of the entire board, but we'll see how that plays out. We're going to need to see some fire and manoeuvre, I think. And speaking of fire and manoeuvre, well, it'll be the British to activate first for let's kick this game off. Well, the action has well and truly opened, and I've done a couple of moves for both sides. The British managed to deploy a unit straight up here, and well, they with their first set of command actions, they also determined that they were going to attack up this flank as well, deploying out in the open technically, but they were hoping to be able to sprint forward into cover before too many Germans showed up. Unfortunately for the British, the Germans got a double activation with a pair of 6s in their first roll, deploying a unit into the cover here who opened fire. Put down, over the course of a couple of activations, they put down a withering hail of fire upon this British squad, who've lost a singular man, and also sustained 7 points of shock on the entire squad. So not good at all start for the British, immediately coming under intense German firepower. But yeah, that's unfortunate for them. The British deploying a senior leader in the back of the tree line, whose services may well be needed in order to get that squad moving efficiently again. The Germans also deployed their little scout half-track team here as well, who moved up off the table edge, and have started misfiring their light machine gun onto the British in the building, inflicting a singular point of shock on the British anyway. But now, yes, so the contact has well and truly been established. Just to let you know, the Germans put most of their barbed wire emplacements over here in this area, including the tank traps, to try and stymie any British offensive from this area. So yeah, it will maybe well funnel the British into a particular line of attack, which has now got a machine gun pointing down it, as you can see. So yeah, overall not a great start for the British, but they haven't suffered any force morale. I've only had 1 casualty so far as well, and yeah, we're going to go see how they respond to the fact that they've now found some Jerry. Excuse the quite dreadful light coming through from my blinds. It's best I can manage in my little games room at the moment, I'm afraid. The other way around is an awful lot worse. But yes, the action continues. The British here continue to take brutal fire from that from the burnt out factory over there, leaving another Tommy dead here and throwing more shock as quickly as they can take it off through their leaders. However, help has arrived in the form of the Wasp flamethrower carrier, which is just scooched up to get a better shot in the future. We'll see if it survives long enough to make its presence felt. And moving to the action over here, there's a bit of a gulf in the middle, possibly caused by this big open space we've got here. The other squad has moved out and has crossed the road, jumped across, has assumed a tactical stance and is now moving up, possibly trying to force the hand. The Germans have a jump off point sitting quite vulnerably here. The Germans can't just allow the Tommies to walk in and take it. Don't know if a singular half-track team is going to be enough to deal with the threat, but you know, we'll see. I mean, if they can just lock this one down, that cuts off quite a big lump of the German, well, latitude to act, shall we say. So yeah, the Germans will have to act to do something about that, and we'll see what they get up to now. Okay, the game is really developing now. The Germans actually did deploy their second squad, and their second and last squad now in this building here, and opened fire, causing a lucky hit that killed one of the British infantry sneaking up on their jump off point there in the German baseline. The withering fire from the building over here continued, hitting another Tommy here, but the flamethrower Wasp activated and, as you can see, fired and did a huge amount of damage to the German squadron here, killed 2 and 6 points of shock altogether. Germans got off pretty lightly, to be perfectly honest. They're still actually able to move. Yeah, so that's pretty bad for the Germans right here. But you know, so the British, now feeling that they've suppressed this building sufficiently, they actually deployed their 2-inch mortar up here. As you can see, probably earlier they put down a covering smoke here, so there's actually now a wall between the Germans and the British, so that this squad won't get cut down horrifically over the course of turns between 2 machine guns. And yeah, so yeah, the British mortar teams up here in this building, taking advantage of the hard cover provided, and got a pretty good commanding view of the tabletop as a whole as well. So yeah, the Germans, for their part, actually, before the Wasp got a chance to fire, they didn't just sit there waiting for it. They did fire a Panzerfaust at the Wasp, but unfortunately were one short of hitting it. It had moved flat out. It's small, it's hull down, and it's a tough target, to be perfectly honest, but still one short of hitting it. And if they had hit it, you can pretty much bet that it would have gone up in a huge amount of flames. But was not to be. So that's that. So that's a few more activations down. I'm going to go to the Germans now. I think they're going to have to do some tactical thinking, because they just can't stand around being flamethrowered all day. Well, the Germans have hit back very, very hard indeed. They used their chain of command die, which they'd accrued, to ambush with their Panzer Schreck team, and destroyed the Wasp in one single round. That was pretty hardcore. The game has continued. Smoke has been deployed by the British here to nullify the firepower. The Germans in here have used their junior leader has been rallying shock off at an impressive rate. There's only 2 points remaining now, so they've almost dusted off all the damage from that terrifying flamethrower strike against them. Meanwhile, over here, the action has sort of wound down a little bit as the smoke has been deployed, and neither side really knows what to do first. Neither side's command dice really enabling them to take advantage and to reposition properly, to be perfectly honest. Too many 2s being rolled, so not enough 3s and 1s and whatnot, but you know, that's going to change any second. Both sides being very cagey with the deployment of their armour in terms of their tanks. Both sides deploying their little carriers, but not their tanks yet. Obviously we'll see who actually folds first and deploys their tank, but it'll probably be the British, since they're on the attack after all. Yes, it was the British first. Their Comet moving onto the table, opening fire on the Germans in this building here, but missing, unfortunately for them. Otherwise, the British advance across the table generally improves. These guys sidling up the road here whilst maintaining their tactical stance, and the guys over here have finally made it in their dash towards the ruin here. So they're out of the worst of the fire from the Germans since the smoke has obscured them. They've been able to pick up the pace a little bit. The sergeant who was in the woods has actually moved over here to better command the mortar team as well. Has left the British jump-off point back here rather denuded of protection, but the British are going to bank that the Germans don't get too cocky, shall we say, and try to take it. The British still have a as yet uncommitted squad, so yeah, that's that. The Germans for their part have been firing back where they can. The half-track team over here have been carrying on firing at the British squad, killing another brave soldier here, and but with a lucky dice roll, but it's yes, and inflicting further shock on the British. But yeah, the British momentum hasn't been spent just yet. They lost 2 force morale points for the Wasp going up in flames, but they've still got something left in the tank, so they've got plenty of fight left in them at this point. Oh, it's all kicking off now. The A34 has started firing HE into this building. It's found its range now and started picking off Germans inside, so not so good. Well, killed one, been some shock. The British round the corner here have started filing round in order to start pushing an attack up the pitch and out of sight of the Germans. The Germans for their part have deployed everything onto the board now, including their senior leader. He's got nothing left to bring on, so I thought he might as well. He started moving out the squad from cover here, and even the Panzer Schreck team up as well to threaten the British jump-off point. So the British may well be forced to commit their last squad to defence rather than attack, which is something they probably don't want to do. The Mark IV has appeared, driven round the corner and opened fire on the Comet, scoring a hit and it's causing some some track damage. It's going to be a bit slower now, that Comet, and so the British armour has already come under fire quite heavily, and it's going quite brutally for both sides now, and we're starting to see the game develop. There's not too much left to come onto the board, so and it's only all on the British side too, so the British can pick where they want to deploy it, but is it going to be enough to put up with this brave German defence? And yeah, unfortunately for the British, it's had to come to an end. They were not able to maintain the attack at all in the end. The Comet opened fire back upon the Mark IV and missed, unfortunately choosing to stand its ground in a tank duel rather than it could have backed out of the way and saved it, and potentially gone to manoeuvre, but it went to try and use its high velocity gun. Unfortunately it missed. The Mark IV adjusted its aim and, as you can see, brooded up in spectacular fashion. Tank guns at this game in this range are very, very dangerous, almost regardless of who you're shooting at. So yeah, there you go. Especially at this point of the war, the Mark IV then moved around to show this British squad, which had advanced really bravely up the road, desperately trying to get to this German jump-off point to lock it down and force the German force morale to take a nasty bit of damage. Sadly for the British, they rolled really badly on their last move, leaving them right out in the open. Like I said, the tender mercies of the Mark IV and this redeployed half-track open fire and have pinned them down, killing the junior leader and leaving them in a very sorry state altogether. The Germans managed to end the turn with another chain of command point. They've been racking them up pretty consistently throughout the game. The British never really got one, and the Germans ended the turn at a crucial moment, clearing all the smoke away from the board. Don't know if you can see, there's very little smoke left, and that was just enough to that was just at the wrong moment. This squad was actually shrouded by smoke at one point, and then it all just disappeared at the wrong moment. That's the thing with chain of command. Smoke is very powerful, as it should be, but you can't use it. It becomes a crutch that you can rely on rather too much, and if you do and it goes at the wrong moment, you are left exposed, and that's pretty good. That's good for a game. It's pretty realistic as well. You can't rely on it to be there all the time, and yes, just when it didn't need it to clear, it did, and the Germans capitalised on that with a plum. The British squad that was actually here was really tempted to make a balls to the wall, all or nothing assault on the Germans here, but the Germans here just haven't got enough shock on them. They, they would have torn the British apart, and the British force morale was already perilously close to zero as it was. So the British have actually pulled back, as you can see here, to fight another day. To try manoeuvring. The British Piet team actually even made an appearance. As you can see, it's sneaking around the corner. It was going to appear up here and shoot at the half track, but the half track unfortunately had already redeployed away from where they could see. Moving across over here, the German attack itself, the German counterattack has actually materialised, and the British are firing from the woodland into them. There's a general firefight emerging. The actual Panzerschreck team had to, broke and ran actually, causing a hit to the German force morale, but it's a little too late for the British, who have, like I said, had to call it a day. Their force morale has dropped to the point where they're not really going to be doing an awful lot with their turns these days, and they've got a squad just waiting to be picked up into the bag just here anyway, which will almost certainly break them. So yeah, the wheels have fallen off the British attack. Time to fall back, regroup, get some more tanks together and go back in again, as was so often the case. But that's that. The Germans, though, had a pretty solid defence. They've lost a few men, and but really not an awful lot damage to them altogether, although the game could easily have swung back their way, back against the Germans even, if certain other things had got against them. The Wasp shot did lots of shock, but ultimately not a lot of damage, and it was a fairly accurate, it was quite a lucky Panzerschreck shot that actually finished it off. It's a very small target, it's quite difficult to hit, and if we got another shot off, it would have at least toasted the Panzerschreck team, if not then continue to murderize the guys in here, and that forced the British to abandon their attack on this flank altogether. Meanwhile, the tank duel itself could have easily gone the British's way. The Comet's a solid piece of kit. It's just luck that the German tank hit first, shall we say, and was able to dominate that duel, to be perfectly honest, because once you've hit the target, it becomes easier to hit it again in the future if it doesn't move, which is what the British chose not to do, what with their track damage and everything. I didn't really know if they were going to get out of the way anyway. It was a good fun game. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if the format's a bit, cluttered and weird and stuff. It's just that with unfortunately I'm a little bit injured at the moment, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging too much, and I wanted to do something a little bit different from all the Ancients that's been happening recently. I know that it's good to have a bit of variety every now and again. Like I keep saying, I don't want to just become an Ancients channel, and of course people who miss Batman, if you're watching this, then that Batman will be back, of course. I do like the Batman game a lot. It's just in a funny place at the moment, and I just want to hold on for a second, that's all. And while I'll still be painting models up anyway, so yeah, we're all good. Anyway, suffice to say, plenty more gaming to come, a bit more Ancients of various scales and types, definitely some more World War II, maybe a smidgen of Vietnam soon as well. We'll see, and thank you very much for watching. It really means a lot to me for people who make it this far in the videos. Not that there's many of you, but for those who do watch, I really do appreciate it. It's massive to me, and it gives me the impetus to play the games and actually have fun. I wouldn't play these games solo if people didn't watch, I promise you. And anyway, I'm Shield War 100, and I'll see you next time.